Let us begin the business meeting of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. And I would like to call the meeting to order. Note that we have a quorum, several proxies, and appoint Shayla Shreves to my left as recorder for the meeting. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for those who are attending in person, and thank you for those who are attending virtually. Delighted that you can all join us. Today's hybrid meeting, if you will, is an experiment. And I want to see if this will take us to more in-person meetings. Therefore, after the meeting is over, I welcome your feedback. We might even send out an evaluation form, but please let us know if this worked. It is great seeing everyone who's here. I have to say that, and I know that those who are virtual would feel the same way. But let's just see how this goes, and please let us know. Shayla, I'd now like to turn to you to do a roll call of the members, and can you state any proxies that might also be held?
Okay. All right, just like we're on the school bus again. John Finley, is he
Yes,
online?
I'm here. I am here.
All right. John Fry.
Here.
Okay, Rick Gonzalez.
Present.
Christopher King. Mr. King not here yet. Luke Nichter.
Here.
Down the road. Jay Vogt. I saw Jay. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Chairman Reno Franklin.
Yep, I am here. Hello, everybody.
Hello. And Mayor Robert Simison.
Here.
Brett Blanton. Architect of the Capitol, not here yet. Okay. Anyone from the representing the Secretary of Agriculture? We had not heard. Okay. Caroline Henry.
I am present online.
Hello, Caroline. Richard Kidd.
Here, thank you.
And Jennifer Haas.
Here, thank you.
Kristen Fontenot. From HUD.
Thank you.
Hello. And Colleen Vaughn. Here. She's here. Is Christopher Coase with us? He's not online. Okay. Michael Brennan.
Good afternoon, Mike Brennan here from the VA.
Hello. Beth Savage.
Present.
And Betsy Merritt.
I'm here for the National Trust, and my colleague Chris Cody should be online for the National Trust as well.
Thank you. Eric Hine.
Present.
And Valerie Grusing.
Here.
And our Vice Chairman, Jordan Tannenbaum.
Here.
Yes. Jomar Maldonado from CEQ. No. Paula Moore.
I'm here for NAPC.
Hello, Paula. Catherine Slick.
Here.
And Ann Walker. Is Ann online? Not yet. Okay. That's our class, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Shayla. And now I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to adopt the agenda found in your meeting books.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, and a voice vote, simple majority will work, Shayla, in this case? Okay. All right, then, all those that are in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. And while we're in the spirit of motions, I'd like to ask, if I might, for a second one, to adopt the minutes from the June business meeting, which are in your meeting book materials. Looking for a motion and a second here as well.
So moved.
Thank you. Second. Thank you. All those that are in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those that are opposed. Okay, the motion carries. And with that, I'm going to move, thank you very much, Shayla. I'm going to move right into the Vice Chairman's welcome and report. We have a very, very full agenda and a number of very, very important action areas. So I'm going to try to one of my jobs will be to move this meeting along as expeditiously as possible so that we wrap up by 4:30. If we wrap up before, that would be fine too. Okay, so going to run through some of the things that I have been doing on my summer vacation here at the council, performing the duties of chairman since our last meeting, which was on June 29th. These include chairing the Climate Change and Historic Preservation Task Force meetings. This is an area that I enjoy. I enjoy most of these areas quite a lot, but I really appreciate this. There's a high level of engagement, very important discussions that are taking place. And later in the meeting, I will update you further on the progress that we're making in this area. But that has certainly been a great interest and focus of mine in the last couple of months. America 250, I did attend the America 250 Parks Recreation Public Spaces Council meeting on July 21st. And had a chance to underscore the importance of preservation issues in this group, which, if you've been following the papers and with this group, they have been dealing with a number of organizational changes. So they're coming out of those issues and moving forward to get to 2026 in a very organized way. So next, program alternatives. I was pleased to lead 2 of the ACHP's consultation with Indian tribes, Native Hawaiian organizations on the EVSE exemption, the electric vehicle supply equipment exemption, and the Army's request for a program comment on the Vietnam War era housing. We're going to talk a bit more about that later on, but I wanted to assure you that in terms of the interactions with the tribes, Native Hawaiians, that the council and I take our government-to-government consultation very, very seriously. And I appreciated the opportunity, the privilege to lead these consultations. FIPSI, the Federal Permitting Improvement Steering Council. I attended a meeting on September 27th, where the member agencies discussed how the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA funding, will be used to improve permitting. This was another opportunity, and I took it to urge agencies to consider how to augment their own staff for the Section 106 reviews that will be required. And in addition, and just as important to my mind, how they might assist key partners like state and tribal historic preservation officers and Indian tribes in that regard. Continuing on, the Memorandum of Agreement on Native Languages. This was a wonderful opportunity to sign a memorandum among 12 federal agencies on native language preservation. I was joined by fellow member Reno Franklin and head of the Native American Affairs Committee in the signing of this very important document. And really, I think it's the commitment by the federal government is something that we should all take notice of. And I think that's important. And I'm delighted that the ACHP was included in this group. And the purpose of which, as you may know, is to take steps to help tribal nations and other indigenous peoples preserve the languages that are so foundational to the continuation of their cultures. This is an area that I look forward to working with members on. I think we can be very creative in determining how we can add to some of the ideas that have been suggested, how we're going to implement it, working with our federal partners, and then focus in on what the ACHP can do in particular to ensure the continuation and the renaissance, really in many cases, of tribal languages. Sarah Bronin. So I wish I had more news. I really, really do. But there have been no new developments in this area. It is my hope that the Senate might be willing to vote on this during the lame duck session, which I believe occurs right after the midterm elections. But that's unfortunately all I have to share on that in that area. And I'm sure that she is as frustrated as we are, and I am and others, that this is taking so long. Okay, and while we're on positions, this is better news for sure. I wanted to update you briefly on the status of the executive director, the full-time executive director position. As you know, that job announcement was posted back in mid-July. It closed in mid-August, and along with Dr. Teresa Pullman from DHS and Mary Fischetto from OMB, who used to be Mary was the, I believe, the OMB examiner, right, for the ACHP. We interviewed 3 candidates and have recently decided on my preferred one. Right off the bat, I want to thank Teresa. I want to thank Mary. Is Teresa on the call? Okay, well, I just want to thank them anyway. They were very, very helpful. We had a number of sessions and really appreciated their agreeing to serve on that panel. We interviewed 3 candidates, as I said, and very shortly, I will let you know the identity of my preferred candidate. And by very shortly, I mean tomorrow. And then I am going to call an unassembled meeting of the council to vote for your concurrence. Hopefully I'll get it by the end of next week. I am going to provide you with the opportunity to have a video conference early next week to talk about this before the concurrence vote, and you'll have a chance to meet the preferred candidate. I'm going to send out some information on the preferred candidate, my statement recommending the individual, and am more than happy to answer any questions that you might have after you have those opportunities and look at the information. Or if you have any questions now, I'm delighted that this process is moving forward. At least one of the acting titles will be removed. And if nothing else, that's a good legacy to start leaving. So Javier, did I miss anything in that process? And thank you to Javier for his invaluable assistance in this process. As you know, I'm holding down another job and we would not be able to get this far without Javier. It just is that simple. And I can't thank you enough, Javier, really. So.
Sure.
did I
No
make any
problem. No,
mistakes?
you said everything that needed
Okay.
to be said, but
Okay.
just to walk all of you through the remaining process. You will get that email tomorrow with all details on what needs to happen next, which is the Vice Chairman noted is a vote on the concurrence of the membership that's required by statute. There'll be an unassembled meeting vote on Friday, the November 4th. And as the Vice Chairman noted, there'll be an opportunity by Zoom. I think it'll be Monday at 3:30, where you can meet the preferred candidate and discuss this amongst yourselves. Once concurrence is achieved, if it is achieved, none of the candidates were already in the senior executive service. So one extra step that needs to happen after concurrence, if it's achieved, is that OPM has to certify this person into the senior executive service. Thankfully, we got an exemption from a moratorium they have on that process. We got it recently, a lot sooner than I thought we would. Anyhow, the person has to be certified as an SES while going through a background check. If that's successfully done, then the Vice Chairman can extend the final offer, set a final date, a date to start. So again, you'll get all the details tomorrow. It's just that for this meeting, there's enough for this meeting to mingle it with that decision as well. So, and any questions you have about specifically the process, just let me know. Thanks.
Okay, are there any questions that anyone has right now? Are there any questions on any of my activities that I just went through? Okay, hearing none, I will turn to my right and we're getting and ask for the acting executive director's report. Reid, take it away.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's great to see you all. I just realized that there are several people in this room that I feel like I know very well, but I've met in person for the very first time today. And so that's a wonderful treat and a joy. And it's also fortunate too that staff is getting to see one another. If you noted during the tour, there were a number of us that were seeing each other for the first time in several years, as well as we sort of work out of this feels like eternity long COVID phase that we've been operating in. I wanted to just cover two things real quickly. One is the reopening of the ACHP, and then I also wanted to acknowledge some recruitment that we're doing. To the reopening of the ACHP, I just wanted to welcome you as the very first visitors we have had since we opened the door about a month ago. Staff began returning in small numbers, and we are in a phased reopening plan. Phased in so much as we're not all fully reporting back yet in accordance with our telework schedules. It's being phased to allow, of course, additional social distancing and things like that. I think as we work through this phase, assuming and hoping and crossing our fingers that the COVID numbers in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding area don't go higher, we'll be able to open into a fully reopened phase. I just want to be clear, however, that like many federal agencies, for us, fully reopened will include a great many of people regularly teleworking though. So even fully reopened, what you will see if you visit us here, that there's just a certain number of staff that are here. And I think many of you that work particularly in the federal government know that that's a common approach and sort of a widespread management decision following the pandemic to allow and encourage more teleworking. So again, welcome to the in-person meeting. I also just lastly wanted to acknowledge, as I think I may have done in the Federal Agency Programs Committee, that we are excited to be advertising a position soon. I hope, Javier, I hope our folks at personnel give us the thumbs up soon. I think we're within days of having the announcement out on the street. I will send it to the members as soon as it is, so you will know. It will be our digital operations coordinator in the Office of Federal Agency Programs. And I think we recognized a few years back in the budget cycles, you know, these positions take a little while to sort of design and then bring to fruition. We've recognized for a very long time that working both internally within the ACHP and working with our partners and states and tribes and federal agencies, that there were clear benefits to digitizing and allowing the Section 106 process to be carried out electronically. And many of the people around this table have been working on that for many, many years. Feels like we've been talking about it for a decade. I think the occurrence of the pandemic sort of suddenly accelerated that reality that we had to all find a way to almost overnight carry out Section 106 reviews digitally. And so we thought it was important to invest a position that's focused on sort of both sides of that equation, looking at the ACHP to improve our own systems, our own interactions, to speed up and make more efficient and effective our own interactions with others, but also to work with you all around the table, with states and tribes and federal agencies, to talk about digitization, to talk about ways to do it, talk about ways you can adapt the Section 106 process to work that way. So we're very excited that the position, after all this planning and hoping and finger crossing, is about to be advertised. And as soon as it is, I will share it with you all. It's a GG, an accepted service, a 13 position in our Office of Federal Agency Programs. So we're hopeful that we'll get some good candidates. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Great. Okay, any questions for? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just had one question about that position. Will it be someone who has experience in historic preservation, or it's largely someone who has IT experience, or is it a crossover?
You know, that's a great question. And it took us a little time to develop a position description to try to marry those two things together. And we thought long and hard about, you know, which sort of side of that line do we want to land on. And so I think I think the part of that equation I would emphasize the most is historic preservation and Section 106 and environmental review experience. But we have also made it clear in the position description that we're looking for candidates that also have a strong understanding of and hopefully experience working with computer systems, GIS, you know, and all of the information sharing devices that we all use in that. So we're looking sort of for that, maybe that rare unicorn that has both, but it probably leans a little more on the preservation side of it. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the Climate Change and Historic Preservation Task Force. As I said, this is an area that I felt the meetings were very productive. The meetings took place on July 21st and September 29th. Again, a lot of involvement, a lot of progress. A shout out to Reno Franklin for his leadership as we consulted and listened to and engaged Indian tribes and Native Hawaiian organizations on the issue. And happy to report that the task force concluded that the ACHP should develop a policy statement. And the policy statement focuses in on the relationship between climate change and historic preservation. This is really the focus of our efforts, and I was glad to see this come out of those meetings. We want to establish a set of principles that speak to this relationship and the actions that not only that we can take, but in many respects that we must take to protect historic properties. Guiding me in this process and leading this whole effort for the council, and a person who gets a great deal of credit for bringing this issue up, developing it, and leading us to a place now where we're developing policy guidelines and a policy for the agency is Drew Silano. And Drew, would you give a brief statement? There you are to my right on how we plan to approach the policy statement and any other actions that I have missed that the task force is also undertaking.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, the task force set as a goal the idea that we should not try to overreach with this policy statement, that we shouldn't try to cover everything, and that we should instead focus on putting together policy principles that are timely and yet have staying power, because obviously this is not a problem, unfortunately, that's going to go away anytime soon. So the outline, the broad outline of the policy statement that the task force approved is going to be designed to speak broadly to all parties, but it's going to have not just federal agencies, but basically have a sort of a through line in it of examples and specific advice that would address federal agency concerns, including Section 106 concerns, Section 110 concerns. The policy statement would start with discussing more or less the scope of the problem, the range of historic properties affected, the range of impacts on such properties, discussion of the fact that, that climate change is affecting sacred sites, cultural practices, cultural landscapes, and other properties significant to tribes and Native Hawaiian organizations, and also discuss the disproportionate impact of climate change on underserved communities. And then would move then into a series of policy principles talking about adaptation. How do you adjust to the changing climate in terms of how it's impacting historic properties, particularly and including disasters. Then mitigation, the reduction of climate change, how historic properties can help with that reduction, and also how projects that are working, like clean energy projects to reduce climate change, how do you deal with potential impacts to historic properties from those? And then there'll be a discussion of cross-cutting principles. As I mentioned earlier, equity, flexibility in treating historic properties and accepting potentially the loss of historic properties, and the need for education, both at the staff level, at all levels of government, as well as public education. That kind of in a nutshell is the direction that the task for the policy statement is going. Drafting has started, and we'll be meeting again. The task force will be meeting again this coming month to begin some early look at some early drafting of the policy statement. The only other thing I would mention that is happening is we are starting, OPI is beginning work on canvassing federal agencies, states, tribes, all our preservation partners. We're looking for good examples of federal projects and federal planning and programs that deal with historic properties and climate change. Some of these examples could potentially be woven into the policy statement. Likewise, could also be used for our training course, for our publications, social media, et cetera. So pretty soon many of you will be seeing some outreach from us, looking for those examples. That's about it from me,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
any questions for Drew? Okay, oh, sorry, Kat.
Sorry.
Sorry, no.
As I was reflecting on this, Drew, as many of us watched much of the state of New Mexico burn up spring, summer this year, the Hermit's Peak and Calf Canyon fire were the area that burned was near and dear to my heart, and it burned almost 342,000 acres, which, if you want to put it in perspective, is roughly a third the size of Rhode Island. Yeah, huge. And I don't live there anymore. I have good friends and so on that are there, but I was contacted by an archaeologist who had been brought on by FEMA. And as he started talking through issues with me, he had two challenges. Initially, it was, what are the resources? Because people thought about it being basically the national forest that it burned, but it wasn't. It was way beyond that. The second issue that he brought forward was that the state of New Mexico had said to FEMA, our folks are overwhelmed. They can't talk to you now. And that's why he reached out to me as a former SHPO. So and I said, well, so who are you talking to? And he said, well, it's kind of this and that and the other thing. And I said, so have you talked to the tribes? And he said, why would we talk to the tribes? This is on the eastern face of the Rocky Mountains. And, it's not a place where it's grasslands largely. Yes, there are mountains there, but so I said, well, did you look at the state's list of who needs to be contacted? And he said, I didn't know there was one. The state of New Mexico has maintained county by county all of the tribes and pueblos that want to be contacted for decades. And so I gave him where to look. And in truth, when I looked, it was 13 different tribes and pueblos who wanted to be contacted. FEMA was clueless about that, but then it went on where he said, I've been talking to people about these things called acequias. Acequias are a centuries-old process of moving water from one place to another place, so you have farmland. And he said, are they eligible? Yeah. Senator Domenici years ago made sure that the Army Corps of Engineers knew they were eligible, and some of them were listed. So we talked through that, and then I said, well, and have you talked to any of the land grants or land grant heirs? He said, I haven't a clue what a land grant is. So FEMA was trying to figure out what to do in a complete vacuum. Nice gentleman, worked at the Park Service, some other places, had done FEMA work before. He'd never done it in the western part of the United States. And I don't know what you do with that in your recommendations, but I guess what I'm suggesting is that you not only have good examples, but you might have some bad ones. And with that, where do we go with this? And you can't blame FEMA necessarily. You can't blame the SHPO. You certainly can't blame the tribes. The local community is suffering still greatly on how do we care for our resources. And so, with all of that, I don't know where FEMA's going to go with it. The New Mexico delegation got a few extra millions of dollars to go towards response to that fire. But even so, if FEMA doesn't recognize what the resources are and the state can't really communicate with them, where do you handle all this?
One thing I can't remember, maybe Reid, you remember, did DHS and FEMA get any IRA money to staff up for environmental review? I can't remember.
I imagine we have DHS on the screen here. They maybe can speak to that, but to my knowledge, no. Is that correct? Jen?
Reid, this is Jen Haas for DHS.
Right.
Specific to IRA funding, DHS received funding, but not specific to FEMA or to FEMA support. FEMA does have an extensive cadre of environmental professionals who are trained in historic resources and in the NHPA process, as well as consultations, and they are deployable across the nation. And so at times there are individuals who may not be as familiar with a particular locale but they're supported by a cadre as well as a team of individuals who are aware of the processes, procedures, and responsibilities. And so we're happy to provide this feedback back to FEMA regarding what may have been, we certainly hope it was more of an isolated situation, but an opportunity for us to evaluate the training of our team.
And I don't want to say that, I think there were lots of dilemmas with this. And truly, I mean, I would suppose that if you'd never worked in New Mexico, the concept of a ditch being an historic resource would be one that would never occurred to you. And if you'd never worked in New Mexico and had to deal with a quasi-governmental entity, which is a land grant, that the concept that you have centuries-old properties that are managed and owned by not the government, you wouldn't, I mean, once again, it wouldn't occur to you. So I don't know how we get past that except to remind us that there's a whole lot that's not listed. And the land grants never wanted to be listed in the register. So, how do you find that information, and how in particular do those experts, those people go out and sort of do the best job they can do?
Thanks, Kak. Any other comments or questions? And if not, let's move on in our agenda to an item that I just have to say, wow, workforce development as it relates to historic preservation, that there are lots of needs for jobs in an area that until recently, I think you wouldn't have picked this one out as one that needed that attention. It's an issue that's very, very important to me, to the entire preservation community, to you, to anyone who's involved in this area. And really, what we're involved in is still trying to identify, develop, and in school, the next generation of preservation professionals. There just aren't enough of them out there. So how do we approach this? One way in which I approach this, and the council therefore approached this, was that I sent a letter recently to the heads of agencies that have received funding for environmental reviews under the Inflation Reduction Act. There was a lot of money that was made available to other agencies, but we didn't get any. So that's unfortunate, but I certainly in my letter pointed out the importance of adding preservation professionals to their own staffs and to their own organizations. I again, as I said at the outset of this meeting, urge them to consider supporting and assisting SHPOs, THPOs, Indian tribes in their capacity to deal with this tsunami of infrastructure projects and tsunami of regulatory review that is coming down the pike. And also, as Reid mentioned, and in terms of the digital position, to invest in digital tools and information to improve project planning and to assist the partners who maintain those cultural resources data. I'm very familiar with this from my other job at the museum. I know how important digital tools are for access and digital tools are for planning. And I'm hoping that all of these items I just mentioned will ring true and that we get some positive responses to them. This is an area that three of our committees, the whole council is involved in this, but three of our committees have been working on quite a bit and focused on. And I'd like to, in sequence, call on Jay and then Luke and Rick to talk a little bit about how your committees have dealt with the workforce challenges. And so let's, Jay, if you would lead it off from the Federal Agency Programs Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Barely.
Barely.
Just barely, Jay.
I'm sorry because
There we go.
My voice is really not very good, and I regret not being with you today. But the Federal Agencies Program Committee has had lively discussions on this topic. And last week we heard a report from staff about a recent meeting with the Federal Preservation Officers, FPOs, that shed additional light on how the Advisory Council might assist agencies. Federal agencies would like to seek job candidates with more exposure to federal requirements like Section 106 for their academic work. They're really finding applicants unprepared for federal agency Section 106 type work. They also face a unique challenge in recruiting, such as when certain position descriptions are not available in federal hiring processes. Committee members noted how such challenges are mirrored by the state at the state level for the state historic preservation offices. Staff will follow up in three main ways. One, beginning with the federal preservation officers, FPOs, and their stakeholders to define core competencies needed for the Section 106 work in order to offer recommendations for education and training. With the Office of Communication, Education, Outreach, OCEO, expand outreach to academic programs to share with students what it's like to hold a job in the cultural resources field. And third, working with other federal agencies to address common issues about how professional qualifications are defined and when position descriptions may be lacking. We also heard about the Vice Chairman's communication to heads with with heads of agencies receiving funds for the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, to improve environmental reviews about supporting partners such as state historic preservation offices and tribes. There is general acknowledgement that such support can be an important factor in improving the efficiency of the Section 106 reviews for infrastructure projects. I look forward to a continued collaboration with the state historic preservation officers, the federal preservation officers, the tribal historic preservation officers, and others in pursuing these goals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I just wanted to add about that letter because I know we're going to move on to some other topics, but before we move away from that, we took some care to ensure also that, in the event that we were sending it to an agency that is also a member of the ACHP, that we copied you all, that we copied the designee to the ACHP and to the Federal Preservation Officer as well. And I am already aware, having had conversations with a few of the recipients, that they might have not landed in all the right places they need to be. They might not have gotten to the right budget people or the people planning at the department level or what have you. What I would just ask of you as members is please help us get them to the right places. We'll work on that as well, but I just wanted to make that ask. The other thing I wanted to acknowledge is that we will also be sharing copies of those letters with OMB and folks on the Hill as well, so we can sort of point out the need and maybe reference the fact that Section 106 and cultural resources were sort of left out of the equation. So we're doing what we can to get word of that far and wide, and please help us get it to the right people. Thank you.
And of course, asking for money is something I know a little bit about. So I warm to the task, I can assure you. One housekeeping item, if you put your hand up there and we're not seeing you, please just shout out that you have a question, because we may not be getting all the questions that are up there. Okay, great. And also, let me, a new development, news flash. When you look at our website, there's now a section on workforce development, and it's a list of links that you could go to find out where help might be needed and what positions are available and things like that. Susan and the CEO group have been very creative in designing this and rushing to put this online so quickly. Thank you, Susan and team. And also thank you, Luke, and you're the next one up to talk about workforce. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've given a great preview of the report that I have to offer. The CEO committee and staff led by Susan have a part of the larger program of tackling the workforce shortage challenge in cultural resources. The staff have made progress since the last meeting by sending out an initial email message from Reid Nelson that included links to job boards and positions in a variety of cultural resources organizations. That email went to nearly 1,000 addresses. Staff have, as mentioned a moment ago, have also created a historic preservation workforce development webpage to house the resources that are linked from the homepage under quick links and trending topics. And we invite you to please take a look. This page will be updated frequently, and staff are hoping you'll feel free to make suggestions in terms of what we could add and build onto it in the future. In addition, Caroline Henry from the Department of Interior also updated the committee on 2 opportunities that OCEO will be working on with her to reach a high school audience with messages about historic preservation and careers. The ACHP will partner as part of that with the Cranbrook School in Michigan to offer 11th and 12th grade students who are in an elective class on historic preservation a lecture and discussion on the legal landscape of historic preservation, focusing on preservation at the national level. Additionally, a Cranbrook student will be working with the ACHP for his senior May project the last 3 weeks of the school year, just some months from now. Details are still being worked out. In addition, Ann Walker expressed her excitement about the ACHP working with Cranbrook and suggested that middle school students, not just high school, but drilling down even to the generation after that, middle school students who are alumni of her Preserve America Youth Summits would also be good resources for outreach on how to reach younger audiences. A number of excellent ideas were mentioned, including the idea that state and tribal historic preservation officers could be ambassadors to schools. Was a topic we discussed at some length, and that preservation graduate programs, reaching again, in addition to these other groups of students, would be good for reaching younger students. Graduate programs would be willing to actively recruit, in particular at HBCUs, kind of crossing over into one of our other initiatives. And so that is my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Questions for Luke? And then Rick, if we could turn to you for a discussion about how your committee, Preservation Initiatives, is focusing on workforce development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And later on in our meeting, we'll have more information. But the PI committee has been looking at workforce development issues as regards to the shortage that we've been having for quite a while on preservation craft people trained in traditional trades. The ACHP first looked at this issue in depth 2 years ago, when we developed a policy statement on promotion and value of traditional trades training in 2020. Also, in regards to the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, includes funding that we think could possibly be used for traditional trades, hiring and training, which we discussed last week and which I'll give you an update later on in our meeting today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Rick. Any questions for Rick? If not, thanks to all of the committee chairs and the committees for their fine work in this area. And we look forward to seeing the results of that work and seeing progress the next time we meet. So thank you all. And now we're turning to the Native American Affairs area on your agenda. And I want to ask Reno Franklin to report on the ACHP's involvement with the White House Council on Native American Affairs and share news of the administration's upcoming Tribal Nations Summit. And as you know, with Reno, and anything else you care to talk about, Reno?
Can we talk about the surprising start to the New York football teams this year? I mean,
Oh, maybe I went too far, Reno.
No, only good news here. Yeah, so absolutely, Jordan, and so good to see you and everybody else. I apologize I'm not there. I'd actually planned on it, but I'm just coming off of a 5-day deployment to our emergency operations center for some nasty weather that was coming through. So those are 18-hour days, Jordan. I'm too old for that kind of stuff anymore, but somebody apparently forgot the memo. So let me jump into this here. We have We have been busy, and first, we'd just like to recognize the support that we get from you, Jordan, and all of the staff at ACHP. It makes me able to do my job easier, but also it that support also helps Ira and his hardworking crew to also be able to get their work done. So the first thing with the White House Council on Native American Affairs, there's no action needed. So I'll just briefly summarize that the White House Tribal Nations Summit is coming up. It'll be in person. I will be there November 30th and December 1st at the Department of Interior. And for anybody that's interested, I think we're going to have a big smackdown, smack talking basketball game that we can finally get back together and start again. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then there is a secret basketball court that tribal chairs will be slam dunking on Interior staff, or maybe the other way around because Brian's pretty good. But so nice to finally be able to come and see each other and do those kinds of good needed actions between tribal leaders and federal agency folks. That summit has it's not just that it's important, it's just it's so needed to get tribal concerns and to give us access to the secretary level and higher levels of the federal agencies, the federal government. It really becomes a good dialogue for us to understand the agency thinking and the agencies to understand what it is that we as tribes are asking. So I will be there. I'll be there as a tribal chairman. And Jordan, anything you need from me, I'm there to fully support you as well. So lots of stuff that's directly related to us and the work we do and the consultations that we have been doing at ACHP. We're walking into this Tribal Nations Summit as a highlighted agency for some of the work that we've got done around climate change, languages, treaty rights, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP. So looking forward to it. And if there's any questions on that, Jordan, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll throw it back over to you.
Okay, any questions for Reno? Okay, Reno, you can continue on with the talking a little bit about our native languages memorandum of agreement, and also the policy on burial sites, human remains, and funerary objects. Those two. You're on a roll, Reno. You're on a roll.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things here. Again, talking about Ira and just the work that him and his crew have been doing. It's just amazing. We've really been working hard. The policy statement on the burial sites, human remains, and funerary objects, it's not coming to you all just yet. We're still in the consultation piece. You all as members should be getting updates from the Native American Affairs and the FAP committees. But just to make sure everybody knows, there's a OneDrive. You can facilitate member access so you all can see it, and a web page for the public to review draft documents. So we have some recorded presentations, and there's access to other related information available there. So since the last meeting, we've held numerous listening sessions about proposed updates with Indian tribes, Native Hawaiian traditional practitioners, SHPOs, federal agencies, and the African American community. So we've received a lot of feedback, a lot of very constructive, good feedback, and it's reflected inside of the drafts that are now, circulating and making its way through with a list of specific policy principles. And we did go over that in our Native American Affairs meeting, and and it seems that we definitely is generally as well accepted. The comments, just kind of briefly, comments we've heard from members, that we are tracking is the need to prioritize Indian tribes, Native Hawaiians, Indigenous peoples. Comments around confidentiality and management of sensitive information, a greater emphasis on respect and deference to associated communities, to reinforce the role of Indigenous knowledge and how it plays out in the Section 106 process. And finally, that the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, climate change, and repatriation should all be addressed in relation to burial sites, human remains, and funerary objects. And so all stuff that are near and dear to us. Staff is going to continue to coordinate in the development of this resource with National NAGPRA and the National Register and other authorities that intersect with the policy. So our goal is to create a product that works in harmony and unison with other authorities while advancing the consideration of burial sites, human remains, funerary objects in a progressive manner. So we really want to make sure that, that this is being done with tribes, not to tribes. And that's a key piece of policy there. So again, members have reviewed the proposed timeline. We did share with the committee what that policy, or excuse me, what that policy a timeline looks like for this policy, and got comments. It seems like that's the direction it's going is a good direction, and we'll continue on with that. So while again, there's no action right now for that we're going to ask you to take, but that's coming up, and you can expect to see that soon. Jordan, did you want me just to jump right into the next item that we have, which is again the language MOU?
Yeah, only preface it by thanking you and Ira for putting together that ceremony, for inviting me to participate in a very moving ceremony, and to thank you for the work you're doing that we'll all do together to carve out a role for the ACHP in this area. Language was so important to this country that in the boarding schools, they would punish someone for speaking a language. And so that attests to the importance to culture of language. And I'm delighted to see this initiative. It was my pleasure to sign the memorandum along with 12 other federal agencies with both you and Ira by my side. So thank you again. And now your turn.
Yeah, no, good. We felt I think a lot like bodyguards standing next to you. So that's pretty good. Yeah, I think first I would thank Miss Hattie Mitchell for coming out representing the Prairie Band of Potawatomi. So anytime that we do have tribal leadership that comes out to participate in these types of things, I think it's a big show of respect for the work that we do. Yeah, Jordan, can't express enough, as we as Indian tribes and Native Hawaiians, folks forget that there were boarding schools as well in Native Hawaii. And, this is the first thing that they attacked was our language and trying to separate our culture from our children. And just the repercussions of that have been felt throughout Indian country for generations now, and continue to, as those final boarding schools that went after language, their policy obviously has changed, but the damage was done. And anytime that we as an agency with the responsibility of protecting, tribal resources and protecting the things that are as meaningful to tribes as they are in these sacred places and the interpretation of those things, a lot of interpretation of Indian tribes of sacred sites, it can't be done in English, and many of you come from nationalities and places and other countries where it's very similar for you, and that those things are specific to your language. Indian people are very much like that. Not every tribe, but at some point everyone was. And so, for the ACHP signing this, it is a thing of beauty. It's a thing of the ethical thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. And I think it'll lead to some exciting conversations that move forward, Jordan. It can't be lost that you're the person that signed it, and then to be able to be in the room with Ira as he honored you with his tribal flag. It's the first time I've ever seen or been a part of that ceremony of a tribe honoring an individual for his work done by actually giving them their tribal flag. So, Jordan, I can't think of a better person to deserve that type of honor than you. I can't think of a better thing for that type of honor to be bestowed upon a person than for the efforts that will happen as a result of us signing on with this MOU. So lots of other stuff, involved with that will play out over the next few months, and we'll be reporting back to all of you, the Native American Affairs Committee. And if should you want to join us, I would encourage you to, so that you can kind of see where the results of that MOA or MOU and us being a part of it are. So Jordan, I think I'll leave it with that. And if there's any questions for me, please let me know.
Yeah, and any questions on any any other points that Reno has made? Or Reno, do you have any other items that you want to bring up, or?
No, I believe that's it for us.
That's it? Okay.
We're busy, and and I think you all know because it's a long report out, but I also want to give everybody else time too. So yeah,
Right.
that's what we got.
Okay, but thank you, and be safe out there in the work that you're doing, the very important work that you're doing. Okay, let us move on, if there are no other questions, to the next item on our agenda, which is section 106. And we're beginning with the electric vehicle supply equipment exemption. Jamie Leukinger, thank you very much for your work on this project, and your colleagues who worked with you. And the federal number to develop the exemption for the electric vehicle supply equipment, which, by the way, is our first in 20 years. So that makes it exceptional in its own right. The importance of this effort in combating climate change and the investments the administration and Congress have made to the tune of about $7 billion through the bipartisan infrastructure law is very, very important. And the importance of this council acting on it is, I think, self-evident. I have been involved in the consultation sessions personally with states, Indian tribes, Native Hawaiian organizations, preservation organizations, as well as members themselves. And I am very, very pleased with the work that's been done. I have a lot of confidence that this addresses the concerns. And I'd like to now ask you to report on, okay. Or Jay, yeah, that's what I thought, yeah. Jay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The Federal Agencies Program Committee had a brief discussion about the electric vehicle supply equipment exemption proposal last week. And we heard from staff about how the proposal had been refined in response to comments. I would like to call on Jamie Leishinger, Assistant Director, for more detail on how the exemption reflects member input and stakeholder comments. Ms. Leishinger.
Thank you, sir. And it's not quite 20 years, I think by my calculations, actually 18, but close enough. Yeah, so in the meeting book, and it was also shared with you all via email on September 26th, but there was a paper in there that was the documentation package that's required by the regulations. As a reminder, there are 3 thresholds that have to be met, or criteria that have to be met in considering to issue an exemption. The first is that the actions are undertakings, and given the amount of federal investment and the requirements for federal facilities and federal land managing agencies, it's clear that there is a universe of undertakings that would happen here that would be subject to review under section 106. The second was that the undertaking's potential effects are minimal or not adverse. And I would say this is probably the part of the consultation process that's really been the crux of the most conversation. I think, as you'll see again a little bit further in the paper, and I'll touch on this a little bit more, I think there's an argument to be made that these effects there are effects and they are not adverse. So again, the second criteria could be said to have been met. And the last is that the exemption is consistent with the purposes of the NHPA. Looking at the language there in section 300-101, it talks about, modernizing, productive harmony, and so on, given the climate change emergency, and looking at the long-term use and availability of historic properties. I think there's an interest in having electric vehicles and their supply equipment be a part of historic properties. The summary of the consultation efforts were the biggest part of the documentation package. We received a lot of comments, and what's in the documentation package has both a summary of the written comments as well as the comments that were shared during the 7 consultation meetings that happened. So I just want you to know that the verbal comments that were received during the meetings are also captured in this summary as well. There were about 11 different categories of comments, some of which would probably fall more into the administrative category, something along the lines of being able to amend the exemption. That's not something that we've had in the other 2 exemptions that are currently in effect. we've added a provision there, to allow for something along those lines. There were a lot of questions about the scope of the exemption, the detail within it, what is included, what isn't included. So there were a lot of revisions made from start to what you see in front of you now about the conditions under which we think electric vehicle supply equipment would result in no effects, or in other cases, no adverse effects to historic properties. And then just again, we do offer some more summary within the documentation package about more detail on how we responded specifically. In general, I would say we've added a lot more detail from our federal partners based on their programs, based on their technical specifications, knowing that I'm not a civil engineer and I'm not going to be the one going out doing this. It was helpful to have that input from folks like DOT and GSA to make sure that we got the correct technical detail within this exemption. And then we did also refine the conditions under which electric vehicle supply equipment could use this exemption. Talking about using the lowest profile equipment, using complementary colors for that equipment, not exceeding previous levels of documented ground disturbance, and so on. So we went back and kind of refined that. And I think if you look at the first draft to the final draft, there's a lot more detail that's been added to make sure that we're not surpassing the adverse effect threshold, specifically going back to what's in the regulations about diminishing the integrity of the property. So with that, I'll go ahead and close. I'm certainly looking forward to the discussion. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate your leadership and your hard work with this exemption. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report on this item.
Yes, I am in support of this effort, and I would like to know, is someone willing to make a motion to approve this measure?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I would move that the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation approve the electric vehicle supply equipment exemption as presented the membership in the meeting book.
Terrific. Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay.
May I comment here, please?
Yeah, now
Hello?
discussion.
No.
Open to discussion. Yes, yes. Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Valerie Grusing, Executive Director of NAFPO. In NAFPO's letter from September on this proposal, we respectfully request that it be withdrawn. The sentiment of our board of directors is unanimous and emphatic. The process from the beginning has been flawed and our concerns persist. We maintain that an exemption is not an appropriate alternative here, and that tribal concerns provided to ACHP during consultation have been given lip service during the predetermined path to exemption. Approval of this proposal would result in adverse effects to historic properties of religious and cultural significance to tribes. A more detailed explanation is in our letter, but what I want to emphasize here is that this exemption is contrary to the purposes of the NHPA and the mission of ACHP. We appreciate the administration's investment in renewable energy expansion, but it cannot happen at the expense of places and resources significant to tribes. NAFPA would welcome a chance to work with the ACHP on an outcome that aligns with the principle of free and prior informed consent as prescribed in the US endorsed United Nations Declaration on the Right of Indigenous Peoples, as well as with the administration's mandates to strengthen nation-to-nation relationships and advance environmental justice.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you. Other comments? Oh.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Reno Franklin.
Yeah, Reno.
So I just want to speak about this. I heard in those consultations, from tribes, numerous tribes that brought the issue up of, it wasn't a concern if they were hanging something in a pre-existing power source that was inside of a garage. I wanted to be really clear about that. I don't think any tribal leader had a concern about that. Where the concern was that when there was going to be trenching in any way, shape, or form, and I don't feel like that was adequately addressed. I don't think that we as an agency reported back to tribes in an acceptable manner that no cultural resources would be affected by this type of construction, by some of these projects. I think we did a really good job of informing tribes of what the potential projects were, what this covers. So I would actually be a no vote on this because we did not complete and finish that portion of tribal consultation and report backs. So thank you for hearing me.
Yeah, of course, Reno, of course, and thank you for sharing those comments with us. Much appreciated. Are there any other comments? Yes, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The National Conference of SHPOs would like very much to emphasize its support for NAFPO in this instance. We think that we're very close to perhaps getting to a solution, but we think that adoption at this point would be premature. We additionally have a few minor concerns still within the text of the agreement, pertaining primarily to installations that could take place along, for example, street level, at the street level, where existing electrical infrastructure could occur. And we would very much welcome the opportunity to work with the advisory council to address these remaining issues so that we can get to a yes.
Thank you, Eric. Other comments? Oh. Yes, Betsy.
The National Trust is also supportive of the concept of this electric vehicle exemption, and we'd like the council to work with NAFPO to address the concerns that have been raised. We have, like NICSHPO, the National Trust has submitted some comments to the staff, and the staff has been very responsive in making revisions to the exemption. So we agree there's room for more progress in that regard. We're planning to abstain from voting yes in deference and out of respect for NAFPO's concerns. And so we hope the council will move forward to address those concerns. Thank you.
Great, and thank you, Betsy. Thank you. Other. Yeah, any federal members who want to speak to this?
So Jordan, I'll just quickly chime in for DHS and express our appreciation, particularly to Jamie for her work over this or on this exemption. It has been going on for well over a year now, as we have worked to develop a product that works for all of the interested parties. And so recognizing that the stressors and the influx of additional funding that has come about even since we started this effort, we would encourage folks to just go ahead and move forward on a vote today. We definitely want to extend our appreciation to Jamie. We greatly appreciate the work that she's put into this over the past year. And, we just appreciate that the work the council's done here.
Thank you, Jennifer. And any other federal members want to? Yes, Elaine.
Thank you. I too would like to express appreciation to Jamie and the advisory council for all the work that has been undertaken with this endeavor. I feel like this has been a group effort. It hasn't just been the count, it's been a team effort.
Right.
From the start, from when it was first started, when DHS came to you with a proposal and other agencies got involved because we saw additional funding coming in, and realizing the extent of the limited resources that are out there by the agencies that are going to be doing the reviewing. And as well, the SHPOs, the TIPOs, all the parties involved, trying to get to a resolution that nothing is perfect, but this action with the stipulations that are identified to it, for it to meet that exemption, we feel is the best outcome at this time and feel very confident with the people that we have moving forward to ensure a success. And just want to, you know, go on notice with our support of this moving forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. Any others?
Mike Brennan here from VA. You know, one of really appreciate all the work that has gone into this, and it's important in our portfolio because we're energy high power users. I'll put it that way. Our stations and healthcare are challenged to meet sustainability goals, and we really look towards shifting fleet towards electrical vehicles as a part of our moving forward to meet really aggressive sustainability goals for the department. I would encourage us to go ahead and vote on this today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Beth, do you have any thoughts?
I just support what has been said by others thus far. When this became, DHS initiation of this concept, and then the discussions among federal agencies being very sensitive to what is included in the exemption and what is excluded from the exemption. And not everything is included in the exemption. It really was focused on extant resources and simply the upgrading for. I understand the concerns that have been raised, and I think that there has been substantial time and effort in improving the exemption and the language to be much clearer in what the intent is for the activities. From GSA's perspective, we too are this is a huge initiative for the federal government writ large. It's a huge initiative for GSA, who will be a blanket purchase order supply contractor for lots of federal agencies. Knowing that, we took the proactive approach of working with the other side of our house. I'm from the Public Building Service, and the blanket purchase agreement is through the Federal Acquisition Service. And we inserted language very specifically into the request for proposals so that those doing the work would bring in culturally sensitive areas that the contractors would be bringing folks with expertise, so that it was not something where John Q contractors just going out and going at it, but that in areas where they are, there is cultural sensitivity, that they would have to be communicating with those in the affected area. So that was just one thing that we did because we saw it as something before it hit the street that we could ensure due consideration of cultural resources prior to the awards of those regional contracts, which has occurred at this point. Our Federal Acquisition Service was very open to our input in that regard. And we felt like when we were taking that role, we weren't doing it just as a GSA role. We were doing it on behalf of a government-wide solution. And so I appreciate all of the discussion, and I appreciate all of the work that has been done for everyone on this. But I do think that we have gotten to a reasonable position on the content of the exemption. And I do believe that it was done with the best of intent and the best of due diligence as the process demands.
Thank you, Beth. Let me just quickly call on Richard, and then Reid has a comment. Richard? Richard Kidd? Yeah, we can't hear you. We still can't hear you. Okay, let's come back to Richard and read your point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I just wanted to make one point. It's in the meeting book, but I wanted to be sure that everybody's absolutely clear about this. We understand and acknowledge that there are installation activities that certainly would have the potential to adversely affect historic properties. We understand that there are likely many circumstances where EVSE will be installed where there is a very clear potential for adverse effects. I just want to be clear that those are not covered by this exemption. This exemption was written in a way in an attempt to make it narrowly focused on that range of activities that are extremely unlikely to result in adverse effects. Now, we acknowledge that that theoretically it's always possible. Nothing in life is absolutely certain. But I can attest, as many of the members have said here, that we looked at this issue, despite the fact that there may be some that still disagree where we landed. I want to just reassure the members that we looked at that issue very carefully and felt that this subset of activities, not the entire EVSE program, but this subset really fit nicely under an exemption. So I just wanted to clarify that there likely will be many EVSE installations that will be the subject through the normal Section 106 process of reviews with states and tribes and others. This just covers that subset. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Reid. Richard, I don't see him up there. Richard? Okay.
This is good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Thank you. I just wanted to align my comments in support of this proposal with those of my other fellow federal agencies. I am here in Cincinnati for the Federal Energy Exchange, where we have over 2,000 of our fleet managers, energy managers, construction managers. And yesterday at the plenary session, every single speaker from cabinet secretaries, Senate confirmed officials, members of the White House, they all spoke to the expectation that federal agencies must lead by example in accelerated deployment of electric vehicles. And interestingly, they stated that it was not the vehicles that were the challenge, it was the charging infrastructure. So everyone leaving this conference is going to go back to their parent agency and say, we need more electric vehicle charging infrastructure and we need it now. So I think the proposal is, we've watched it evolve over time. We think that it's balanced. It will give our fleet managers, our building managers, our energy managers what they need to meet the expectations of the administration and the Congress, but to balance those in a responsible manner with other concerns. So we're in favor of the proposal and we're going to vote yes. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Jay, do you have any comments? Any perhaps final comments?
I have no further comments. Let's proceed with the vote.
Okay. All right. Are there any other comments before we go for it? And this is going to be a roll call vote, right, Shayla? Okay. So let me just give the good news. I think it's a unanimous vote for appreciation for Jamie and her team. So let me just get, okay. All right. All right.
I actually almost just had a heart attack of what unanimous. Did I miss a different vote?
Sorry. Okay. Okay, Shayla, if you could.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I will roll through our entire list just because we cannot see everyone on the screen. So if you're here, please answer. If you're not, we will skip over you. Mr. John Finley.
Vote in favor.
Okay. John Fry.
Yes.
Rick Gonzalez.
Yes.
Christopher King.
Yes.
Luke Nichter.
Yes.
Jay Vogt.
Aye.
Reno Franklin.
Nay.
Mayor Simison.
Aye.
Brett Blanton.
Abstain.
Anyone representing the Secretary of Agriculture? No one joined us. Okay. Caroline Henry.
Yes.
Richard Kidd.
Yes.
Jennifer Haas. Jen Fontenot.
Yes.
Michael Brennan.
Yes.
Beth Savage.
Yes.
Betsy Merritt.
The National Trust abstains.
Eric Hine,
The National Conference abstains.
Valerie Grusing,
NAFPO strongly objects. No.
Vice Chairman Tannenbaum,
Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay, Sheila, would you announce the vote?
yes, and the motion passes with 15 votes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. And thank all of you for a very important and a very thoughtful, perceptive discussion about this. Thank you. Okay, Jimmy, thank you. Yep. Okay, let us now move on to the Army program comment on Vietnam War era historic housing. And I have some just quick comments that I would like to make about the whole process. And there are 40,000 feet to be sure. Being a practitioner of the process myself and teaching the process, I do one of the things that I think is very important about the 106 process, and that has ensured its survival when other environmental legislation has been attacked much more often, is it's the flexibility of this process and the creativity of the process. And I have had first person experience with a variety of the program alternatives. And I think that they're very important to ensure that there is that kind of flexibility in this particular area. I worked a little bit on the Army exemption, the Army alternate procedure 2200-1. And so I'm familiar with this area. I think it's a very important area. I believe in the whole concept of program alternatives. And I also believe that and I think we saw a good demonstration of it in the last discussion about the exemption, that people approach and should approach this process with good faith and clean heart, as they say in the law. I think that's important, and I assume that will always be the case. And so I do want to speak in support of the program comment being used in a variety of situations, even situations that might involve, with proper drafting and proper consideration and a lot of thought and a lot of discussion and consultation, might involve demolition, as is the issue here. So just wanted to preface my own comments there. And my appreciation to Chris and his team for the tremendous work that you've done on this program comment, and Megan Borthwick at your side to really help shape the whole comment. And I know how much time and how much thought, how much effort has gone into this, not only by you, but by all the parties involved. I know that this is the first program comment developed under our new protocols, I believe, and want to thank Jay and Reno, as well as Blythe, for their work on this as well. I know that they put a lot of time and effort into it. I guess I've been told, I've been told that it's a year-long effort to do. Yes, okay. And the Army has certainly been a very involved and understanding and collaborative partner in the whole process, which I think I want to acknowledge as well, along with all the other partners. I have been involved a little bit, not as much as the rest of you that I just mentioned, but in the consultation sessions with the states, with Indian tribes, Native Hawaiian organizations, and preservation organizations. And I'd like to ask Jay to report on the committee's final discussion on this measure, if possible. So Jay, would you kind of give that report summarizing a bit on the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
The staff updated members on the status of the Army program comment and discussed recent member comments. We talked about how the staff worked with the Army to address those issues through some notable adjustments to the program comment language. The new program comment process is designed for earlier and greater council input and to help lead to a positive result. I'd like to call on Chris Keppel, Assistant Director, to explain more about how comments were addressed and how the staff worked with the Army to make changes to the draft following the members' meeting on October 3rd. Mr. Keppel.
Thank you, Jay. So prior to submitting the program comment to the Advisory Council, the Army did quite a bit of pre-consultation for a great many months and outreach. Thank you. Once the program comment made it to the Advisory Council, was formally submitted, there were two government-to-government consultation with tribal governments. And additionally, there was 2 SHPO meetings, not a lot of participants at either. As of October 20th, 2022, 9 written comments were received. I do also want to mention that we reported this out at the last FAP committee meeting. And right before that, we got comments from our colleagues at the National Trust and ACHP. So we did not have time to really discuss those comments then, but we have incorporated those comments into our comment matrix with all others. And we did have a chance to discuss those comments with the Army in a way that, was constructive consultation. And it was constructive. And here's the themes, really. One is really tightening up our definition, or the Army's definition of what new construction entails, so that there are more sideboards in terms of what is disturbed, what is not disturbed, and it qualifies and clarifies that new construction is limited to the boundaries of previous disturbed areas in the Vietnam War era neighborhoods, and differentiates between disturbed and undisturbed areas, and classifies that new construction will consist of family housing if a housing deficit were identified. Importantly, also new to the program comment is that Army staff, their professional qualified staff would be relied on to provide assessments of the landscape of these Vietnam era family neighborhoods, if such a thing exists. Importantly, I think we discussed cessation of maintenance and demolition as a management action within this program comment. And working with the Army agreed to replace the review process that was in the program comment for properties of particular importance with the standard process for resolving adverse effects within the Section 106 regulations at 36 CFR 800.6-7, which does allow for meaningful consultation if there's going to be cessation of maintenance or demolition of a property of particular importance. The next theme would be, well, how many properties of particular importance are going to be identified? Of course, that is something that the Army is going to do within the first few months of enaction of this program comment. But what we understand that concern. We understand that that's kind of an unknown, and there is some concerns among partners and consulting parties that could it be 0? Could it be just a few? So working with the Army, Advisory Council staff has worked out additional language that will ensure that the Army come and consult with the Advisory Council in the event that there are 0. And I don't just mean staff. We're talking about all of us here in this room, all of you with your professional expertise would sit down and provide guidance to the Army on how to proceed if there were no properties of particular importance identified. Finally, I just want to mention that the Advisory Council has consistently maintained demolition could be, and it's appropriately considered, a management action within program comments. in general. And in fact, it's been included in a great number of program comments, including Cold War era unaccompanied personnel housing, World War II and Cold War ammunition production facilities, disposition of Navy vessels, Veterans Affairs vacant and underutilized properties, and Army interwar housing. So finally, I'm appreciative of the Army for the consultation and the collaboration that they were open to in working with the council. I'm also appreciative of our partners, our preservation partners and members of this council that provided us with really thoughtful comments. Having worked with the Army closely on improving the ability of this program comment to address some of these issues, we find that it meets the requirements of a program comment. It is appropriate. And we think that these adjustments made by the Army recently address all the comments and concerns raised in consultation.
Great, thank you, Chris. I say one more slew of appreciation and thanks for the trust and for Betsy and Eric Nixbo for the work that you did on this. I intentionally have done that because it really made a difference. Very thoughtful, and I understand the time and the effort that you put in. So I understand the issues that you're dealing with. I do, and I want to thank you for being so collegial, collaborative, and helpful in drafting this. So I want the record to reflect that. Now, being aware of the fact that in the discussions that I've been involved in, there have been discussions about amendments. I would, before we open it up for discussion, I think it'd be useful, certainly for me, if Javier would talk a little bit about the amendment process and fill that in so that we can be informed as we move forward, should that come up.
Okay, yeah, we typically have up or down votes, but here we're gonna have an amendment, as I understand it. So I just wanted to walk you through that because again, we're not used to having this process. So in accordance with our operating procedures and Robert's rules, the best way to orderly, go through this in an orderly fashion will be for a main motion to first be made. It would be a motion to adopt the program comment, to issue the program comment and be seconded. Once that happens, then yes, the trust or whoever can make a motion for an amendment, which needs a second. Once that happens, that motion to amend is the one on the floor. So that's the discussion that will first happen and be resolved with a vote. And once it's resolved with a vote, we go back to the main motion, which may be as amended if the amendment passes or as originally set. One other point to raise, the main motion to adopt, to issue the program comment needs 12 votes in favor. Through the way that Robert's rules works and our operating procedures work, the motion to amend itself only needs a majority of those present and voting, meaning in the most extreme example, 1 in favor, 0 against, 15 abstentions, that passes. So just wanted to let you know that the threshold for passing for the main motion will be 12 votes in favor or more. The threshold for the motion to amend just needs a simple majority of those present and voting. Yes, Betsy.
Do you have a count of how many members we have present and voting?
Right now, for the last motion, the EVSC one, we had a total of 20 votes.
Okay, thank you.
But the problem is that I don't see who is on or not.
Okay.
But Shayla will call everyone. But
Okay.
20 is the last count, correct? So again, we should start with the main motion and then move to an amendment once that's seconded. Thank you. And sorry, but I'll probably interrupt a couple of times. I just want us to get it right. Thank you.
Jordan, your voice isn't coming over.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay. I move that the ACHP issue the final program comment for Department of the Army Vietnam era housing historic housing, associated buildings and structures, and landscape features, 1963 to 1975, dated as submitted on October 17th, 2022, and sent via electronic mail by Acting Executive Director Reid Nelson to the ACHP members on October 19th, 2022. Okay, I've made it. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, discussion. Yes, Betsy.
And actually, sorry, Betsy, before you go, one thing that I forgot to add. Due to the operating procedures, DOD has to recuse itself from voting and making seconds, voting or making a second to a motion, but they are free to enter into the discussion. Thank you.
Betsy.
Okay, on behalf of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, I'd like to propose an amendment to the program comment. I move that the program comment, which is the subject of this main motion, be amended by adding the following sentence at the end of section 7.1. And this language was circulated to all members from us in an email. The amendment would read as follows. Notwithstanding any provisions to the contrary, this program comment shall not be used for any management actions involving cessation of maintenance, demolition, new construction, transfer, or conveyance, unless and until the ACHP membership approves an amendment to this program comment to remove this restriction through a vote of the majority of the membership in favor of such an amendment.
Okay.
Yeah, we need a second.
I'll second that proposal.
Sorry, who was that?
I think, was that
Rick
Rick?
Gonzalez.
Rick, okay, thank you.
Rick. Okay, discussion. And by the way, the Army, while they can't vote, they can be involved in the discussion. Just want to make that clear. Okay. Comments?
Yeah, this is Christopher
Oh,
King.
sorry. Yes, Chris.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to quickly say that, decisions like this, conversations like this, obviously come at the tail end of a tremendous amount of work and really appreciate everything that's gone into this. And from our last meeting, really appreciate the Army working on addressing some of the concerns that were brought up in that prior conversation. But really in reviewing the materials and really getting up to speed on this, I have to strongly support our colleagues at the Trust and the National Conference. I think this is a strong position for us to take, and I think it's the right one. And so I would urge everyone to please consider supporting this.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The National Conference, as you've all noted, has been very vocal in its opposition to this agreement, much akin to the way it was opposed to the previous agreement, which has been cited as precedent for this one. And we feel that it's time for the ACHP to take a stand. While it may be appropriate for demolition to appear in a program comment, I think that it must be accompanied by appropriate actions and considerations within the scope of the agreement to make that acceptable. And by no stretch of the imagination do we believe that that's the case before us here. We certainly appreciate the staff's efforts in all of this. We appreciate the amendments that have been made, but frankly, in reviewing the text of those amendments, they are so full of disqualifiers and mays and may nots that we feel that they're rendered meaningless. So we wholeheartedly support this amendment and encourage our colleagues here to do the same.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Other? Richard?
No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to weigh in here, recognizing that the Department of Defense does not get a vote. I'd just like to start by expressing my appreciation, our collective appreciation for the hard work of ACHP and the staff, as well as the other agencies and organizations that have helped us to revise this document. The Department of Defense and the Army are strongly opposed to the amendments as written. They basically undermine our ability to manage our property and meet the needs of the soldiers and their families. So we are not in favor of these amendments, and we encourage everyone to vote against the amendment and to give a straight up or down vote on the program comment as is normal practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Other comments? Chris?
Yes, thank you for recognizing me. Chris Cody, Associate General Counsel at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We'd like to ask the Army to clarify what we see as logically contradicting statements. The Army has repeatedly stated that the actions included in the National Trust Amendment are extremely rare, often citing that during the entire 20+ years of the application of the Cape Hart Wary program comment, less than 3% of the affected resources have been demolished, which averages out to like 0.1% per year. Yet in their email today, the Army also objected to our amendment on the grounds that it would be a, quote, extensive restriction. And these actions are in fact apparently so central to their needs that they would discard the entirety of this program comment per their letter over this issue. So we ask, which is it? Are the actions included in our amendment extremely rare, as you've consistently said throughout the development of this program comment, or are they extensive and essential? And if you do contend that they're extensive and essential actions, why? What makes them so worth scuttling a year's worth of effort and all of the many efficiencies and benefit that this program comment would otherwise provide?
Okay. Other? Yeah, Richard, would you like to respond to that?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you speak. Yeah, can't hear.
Would you like to respond to that?
No, I mean, I think we've done enough consultation, and the period of sort of legal adjudication is behind us. I mean, the Department of Defense's position is quite clear. We believe that the program comment that we've worked on for over a year was done so in good faith and was done so taking into account all of the feedback and input that we have received to date. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Other comments? Yeah, John.
It's for John Finley. Okay. So one thing that and I understand the point of taking a stand, and look, I think everybody on this call is committed to preservation. One thing I don't quite understand, and I don't know who's the right person to answer it. Maybe it's Reid. So if this amendment passes, the program comment fails, and the DoD walks away, what happens next? I mean, in other words, is there a risk you're going to end up with a lesser preservation solution than what we have now?
Which one of you want to take it? Go ahead, Javier. Yeah.
Hi, yeah, if we go ahead with a vote, which is where we're headed, and the program comment is not issued, then there's no program comment. The Army goes back to the regular 106 process, but I'm not sure if that's the situation you were addressing.
Well, for example, what are the options that DoD has at that point, and could, as a result of the options they exercise, create a solution that's actually worse than what we have on the table now?
Yeah, the options that the Army would have absent the program comment would be whatever program alternatives they already have. As I understand that there are some programmatic agreements and memorandum of agreement in different installations that deal with these issues. So they would use those, but absent those, they'll just have to follow this regular Section 106 process.
Could they go for legislation?
Sure, yeah.
Well,
anyone can, yeah.
Yeah, but my point is that if they did, that would create a lesser solution, correct? Potentially.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
If I could just clarify, however, if the amendment were passed, the Army would still be free to maintain, improve, alter, and otherwise rehabilitate the existing structures that they've indicated that they've been interested and need the flexibility in to be able to achieve. So we failed to see the problem.
I would just add to sort of tag on to Javier's point, another option that the Army would have were this to fail is that they could come back, amend or revise the program comment and request a new program comment. If that were to happen, that would essentially sort of kick off a 45-day period again per our regulations where we would carry out consultation. Of course, now that consultation would be focused specifically on the changes and adjustments, but we would have to carry that process out again, and by day 45, have the members weigh in on that as well. Thanks.
Betsy.
I wanted to just make sure I'm not preempting someone else up on the screen. I wanted to just clarify that my understanding is if the amendment passes, the vast majority of the program comment would still be up for a vote and presumably would pass with the amendment. Isn't that the way it would work?
If the amendment passes, the members then vote on whether to pass the program comment as so amended. But I don't know if that's getting to what you're asking though.
Yes, which seemed inconsistent with the assumption in the previous discussion. And so the program comment would still apply to everything else other than demolition, new construction, cessation of
Correct, or
maintenance,
whatever
et
wasn't
cetera.
on that list,
So
correct.
all of those rehabilitation, renovation, all of that work that the Army wants to do on these historic homes could go forward pursuant to the program comment. And we were hoping that with this amendment, we would be deferring just this controversial piece, the application of the amendment to the demolition and cessation of maintenance, which was the primary basis for half of us voting against the last program comment, but that we believe there is a broad consensus among advisory council members in support of what we see as the fundamental core of the program comment, which is its application to substantially streamline and practically exempt in many ways a review of all of this work on renovation and rehabilitation of these properties. And so I just wanted to clarify that we view this as essentially deferring the vote on the controversial application of this program comment. And it is our, I guess you would say, our expectation that if the amendment passes, there would be a future request by the Army that the advisory council again consider these actions and develop a way to address them. But we are prepared to vote yes on the program comment if the amendment passes. We would vote yes in support of the program comment and its application to the renovation and maintenance, repetitive maintenance actions that were supposedly the fundamental core of the request for this program comment. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
And just briefly, my response to Mr. Finley had to do with the hypothetical where the program comment is not passed at all, amended or not amended. So just to clarify, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, other comments? All right. Oh, wait a minute, Richard?
Yeah, so I'd just like to come back in here one last time. I think the proposed amendment removes from the program comment the features that are most attractive to the Department of Defense and to the Army. We ask about other options. We should all realize that we do not live, that we all live in a resource constrained world. Earlier, we had a discussion about human capital and workforce development where we all acknowledged insufficient staff to meet the historic preservation needs that we all face. So the Cape Heart Weary program comment and cost benefit analysis will save us about $450 million, which is money that is then able to be put back in to the houses in question and other properties that we manage without the corresponding savings. Also, so only 5%, if we recognize that 5% of the properties in question, that's almost 400 properties. So if we're going to take each one of those separately, we have a significant staff burden, and we do not generate the savings that we need for the follow-on investment. So I would just say that future options are in fact partially constrained or dictated, if you will, by available resources, both staff and money.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Are there any other federal members that want to comment before we do a roll call on the amendment? Yeah. Oh, Richard. Oh,
Okay, I guess that's
John. Finley.
John.
Yeah.
Okay, John.
So just one more clarification. So we just went through, because I do want to understand what happens after these votes occur. So if in fact, as Betsy was outlining, the vote is approved with the amendment, and DOD has said that they will not use a program comment that includes the amendment, where's, I mean, isn't it a dead letter? I mean, they're not going to use it. So I don't really understand this notion that, in other words, it's kind of a nullity, right? If the Army doesn't use it, it doesn't have any force. Or tell me, where is it if they don't use it?
Yeah, a program comment is something that an agency, it's an option for an agency. So they can say they're not going to use it. I agree that if they're not going to use it, then it's something that's put in a closet and not used at all.
Exactly. That's all I was getting at.
But the point is that by regulations, the ACHP has to take an action to either approve or not approve. But you're right. If the Army's not going to use it, it's not going to use it. It's kind of a useless paper. But it is an action that we need to take today. Thanks.
Understood. Now I got both options.
Okay. Yep.
Chris Cody, and then Christopher King. Not sure who came on first.
Hello, thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to respond to Mr. Kidd's comments that really betray the underlying tension in the messaging that we're getting from the Army that I spoke about earlier, where they continuously represent that these would be extremely rare actions. And yet Mr. Kidd just said that these are absolutely the most fundamental sought after actions that the Army wants from this program comment. Again, which is it? Also, I'd like to state that the National Trust has repeatedly offered other alternative tools to help the Army achieve streamlining for these actions, specifically agreements with state historic preservation offices, programmatic agreements that would achieve the same streamlining while having a bit more oversight over these actions. And in terms of the resource issue that Mr. Kidd brought up, the Army has a $1.9 trillion budget, one of the largest in the federal government, and the care of its housing and its service members' housing should be one of the highest priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Christopher King.
Yeah, I appreciate just further clarification on John's last question. If this does go in a closet and it's not used, basically normal section 106 then applies going forward. That's correct. And that's obviously a higher threshold. And so ultimately, while it doesn't streamline, doesn't help things from a resource perspective, the traditional path through section 106 would ensure that there's a high level of oversight, correct?
Well, it would be the regular path.
It would be the regular
whatever,
path.
yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Wouldn't want to characterize it, but the regular path. Okay. Okay. Other comments from any quarter? If not, why don't we do a roll call for the amendment?
Correct. And this is on the amendment. Again, it'll pass with the majority of those present and voting. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. So you are voting on the amendment. John Finley.
Nay.
John Fry. Rick Gonzalez.
Yes.
Christopher King.
Yes.
Luke Nichter.
No.
Jay Vogt.
Yes.
Reno Franklin.
Yes.
Robert Simison.
No.
Brett Blanton.
Abstain.
Caroline Henry.
No.
Richard Kidd.
No, you can. Yeah.
He's to say he is
Yeah,
abstaining?
we just needed for the record that he'll
Okay.
abstain. Sorry.
All right.
Because it counts, but whatever. It's an abstention.
Jennifer Haas.
No.
Kristen Fontenot.
No.
Colleen Vaughn.
No.
Michael Brennan.
No.
Beth Savage.
No.
Betsy Merritt.
National Trust votes yes.
Eric Hine.
The National Conference votes yes.
Valerie Grusing,
NAPO votes yes.
Vice Chairman Tannenbaum,
No.
Some pretty intense counting going on there.
That's right.
Sorry, I just want to redo the math to be sure.
That's all right. Get it right.
Right.
Get it right.
Mr. Vice Chairman, the amendment does not pass.
And just to clarify, it's 7 yes, 10 against, and 2 abstentions. Yeah, that's it.
You said there were a total of 20 votes, but that only adds up to 19.
The Army.
Mr. Fry did not.
Mr. Fry did not vote, and then it's a 10.
The Army was one of the abstentions,
Correct.
And
right?
the architect of the Capitol.
But Mr. Fry
I'm
did not
sorry.
vote.
Yeah, is it still time to record a vote or no?
Is this Mr. Fry?
Yes,
You can go ahead, yes.
I would vote yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it is 8 yes, 10 against, 2 abstentions. So it still doesn't pass because it needs a majority of those present and voting.
Okay.
So we go back, unless there's another amendment, we go back to the main motion unamended.
Right. That was seconded. So now do we vote on
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Well, to discuss any
Okay.
discussion. of that.
Any discussion? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. So we don't have any Army bases in Idaho, but we do have an Air Force base. And I spend a lot of time talking with the Air Force and the local community there and see the impacts. The issues that they're trying to face. Housing is always one of the most important things for local communities. And that's why I was one who seconded this proposal, was because I see the impacts that the housing, when people are driven off of bases into communities, and the impacts it has on those communities where they're trying to, and Mountain Home's a very unique area where we have our Air Force Base. They don't have access to enough water for their community. It's geographically isolated. We're sending people to live 45 miles to, the people live in my city that commute to Mountain Home, which is an hour away. And housing is a big part of that. They also have bigger issues that they need to address. They need to get water. They need to have infrastructure, the other resources. And so having something that allows them to address the fundamental issues that are creating problems on our bases, I can only imagine that this is similar in other communities around the country. So as someone who sees the impacts of the housing that it has on local governments, that's why whatever we can do to help see necessary investments, improvements in housing to keep people on base, so it doesn't go drive up the costs for the rest of the communities and take away needed housing for other purposes. We need to do whatever we can, in my opinion. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Chris, is that your hand up again? No. Okay. All right. Okay.
Yes, indeed it is. Thank you very much for calling on me.
Sure.
The National Trust would like to offer a further argument now that our amendment has been denied. We strongly urge the members of the ACHP to deny this program comment, both for the reasons, the conversation that we had around the amendment, but also because the ACHP should acknowledge and consider the overall context in which this program comment is being proposed. The Army has repeatedly stated throughout consultation that this program comment is necessary because of the Army housing crisis that was declared in 2018. However, that crisis was declared as a result of an investigative report into the Army's own mismanagement of its housing and its private corporate partners. The degree of mismanagement was so severe that it resulted in federal criminal fraud convictions, and Congress has intervened. The Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations held a hearing on April 26th of this year and recently concluded an 8-month bipartisan investigation by issuing a report entitled Mistreatment of Military Families in Privatized Housing. The report concluded that notwithstanding the acknowledged criminal fraud committed by an Army housing privatization partner, that company was continuing to engage in the same malfeasance. And Senator Tim Kaine made it clear, stating that this would not have happened if the Army had not turned its eye away from managing these contracts. So it's within this context that the Army now asked the ACHP to eliminate nearly all review and oversight and allow the Army and its private corporate housing partners free rein with respect to thousands of historic resources. I mean, this is illogical and would reward failure and fraud. The ACHP should require a high standard of competence and credibility by the federal agency prior to issuing broad program comments. And the Army and its housing privatization partners have absolutely not met that standard. So please, for the sake of good governance, for the sake of our service members and their families, and of course, for the sake of historic preservation, please do not vote to adopt this program comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Other comments? Then I believe we want to do a roll call on the original. Yeah. Okay. The First Amendment.
And yeah, the vote will be on the motion to issue the program comment as
Right.
Originally proposed.
The one that I originally read.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Richard.
Hey, thanks for me to come back in here. So I was told that the ACHP was always a forum for civil discourse. And after Chris's intervention, I'm having flashbacks when I used to negotiate against the Syrians in the UN. Let's not be distracted by some of the things that Chris has said. Starting with the budget is $780 billion for the entire department, not 1.9 trillion. And I believe that, in fact, it is the Army that needs this flexibility to take care of our service members. And it's the Army who has that responsibility, and it can't be shifted or delegated to anyone else. And they have the competence and the experience. I would urge everyone to vote in favor of the program comment as drafted. And again, I would like to close by thanking the ACHP staff for their work and intervention.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Okay, I think now Reno.
Yeah, sorry. I know you were trying to get that, but I want to be on record with saying that I wish y'all cared this much about tribal housing on Indian reservations, but you don't. And that needs to be said as I look back and look at the housing crisis in Indian country that is completely ignored and underfunded. And the staff level, I laugh hearing about the Department of Defense's staffing issues. Like, come to Indian country, we got one TIPO managing, in Navajo, managing an area the size of like 5 states. It's just, there's a little frustration. I don't want to let those kind of comments go unchecked. But at the same time, I look at the way that this program comment was developed, the consultation that happened, specifically focusing on Indian tribes. And I have to compliment our staff on the way they went about that and making sure that Indian tribes had an opportunity to comment and had a clear path for commenting should they have had any concerns on this. And I think that we heard loud and clear that that there wasn't any. And so I just want to point that out from the tribal point of view. I'm not looking for a response. Thank you very much. And thanks for all the comments and the work that was done by staff on this.
Great. Thank you, Reno. Thank you. Rick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out that there is a housing crisis for everybody in the United States and probably in other places of the world too. And I totally respect Reno's comments too, especially, the lack of service there. And our SHPOs too, dealing with several of them in the southeastern United States. In regards to the Army, I thought we were the little engine that could. In other words, I thought we were the small agency, federal agency that was experts in historic preservation input. And therefore, giving that expertise away for free to the Department of Defense and their private contractors seems to me a lack of what we're here for, to provide input, to see things done correctly when it comes to historic facilities across the country and across the different federal agencies. So I'm not comfortable voting for this as a yes, and I hope my fellow commissioners also agree with my point of view. Thank you.
Eric. I just want to say to our colleagues in the room, proceed with caution here, because we have failed to get a straight answer repeatedly by an agency who has repeatedly told us, don't worry, we will never demolish or do it extremely rare. And following that up by a statement saying that removing demolition and cessation of maintenance, which make no mistake is demolition by neglect,
yep,
is their most important thing they're looking to achieve. This is a fundamental contradiction. And we have been experiencing this contradiction from day one of this consultation. We had the same contradiction in the last consultation with interwar housing. If you perpetuate this behavior, it will not end. And I ask you, which program alternative will come next with even worse elements that you will not have the courage to defeat?
Thank you, Eric. Okay, going once, going twice, 3 times. Okay, let's do a roll call.
Okay, so you are voting on the main motion regarding the Army program comment. John Finley,
Aye.
John Fry,
Yes.
Rick Gonzalez,
100% opposed.
Christopher King,
No.
Luke Nichter,
Yes.
Jay Vogt,
No.
Reno Franklin,
No.
Robert Simison,
Aye.
Brett Blanton,
Abstain.
Caroline Henry,
Yes.
Richard Kidd,
It's an abstention.
officially
Sorry.
abstained. Jennifer Haas,
Yes.
Kristen Fontenot,
Yes.
Colleen Vaughn,
Yes.
Michael Brennan,
Yes.
Beth Savage,
Yes.
Betsy Merritt,
National Trust votes no.
Eric Hine,
The National Conference votes no.
Valerie Grusing,
In support of our SHPO colleagues, NAFPO votes no.
Vice Chairman Tannenbaum,
Yes.
Back to this intense counting. Look at that. You're going to get wrinkles if you keep staring at it that closely, the two of you. My God.
I'm looking for hanging chads.
I was just thinking that.
We need to get them the green visors.
Hey, this is Reno. I just want to point out that I appreciate the fact that all of us can be in these rooms and not always and be in full agreement, but walk away with total respect for one another and our opinions as these votes go the way that they go. So just wanted you all to know that there's a high level of appreciation and respect coming from me to all of you.
Definitely needed these days. Good to model. I agree with you, Reno.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. The motion does not pass. That was 11 yes, 7 no, and 2 abstentions.
Okay. All right, I think, may we move on? All right, thank you to everyone for your input, for your discussion, for your advice, counsel, direction. Let's move on to the GSA exemption update. I think we're going to receive an update on this in the future, right? That's basically it. Okay. All right, Jay, you want to say something about the GSA request, though?
I'm just going to say that the committee heard that the General Service Administration's proposal for an exemption was received by the Advisory Council on October 14th, and that GSA plans to provide a 90 days for the Advisory Council's consideration of the proposals. Tribal consultation on the exemption is going to take place next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to add
Yes.
a little bit. Since the FAP committee and since we submitted the working book, we have some corrections and some updates. First of all, I think that the term, when we described GSA as delaying their submission of their exemption, it's kind of inartful. I think what they're just rescheduling it for, another time. And we hope that the exemption will be voted on by unassembled vote before the end of January 2023. And I'd like to also add that we're looking forward to the tribal consultation with the GSA there as well. So far, most comments coming back from stakeholders have really been supportive of this action and in recognition of the effectiveness of GSA's overall historic preservation program.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Chris. Jay, do you have any other comments?
I just have one final announcement, basically, that a series of Section 106 webinars will be coming up in February with new topics focused on program alternatives. So that's my report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, moving on to communications, education, and outreach. Very, very much appreciated the discussion, Luke, about the CEO committee and the work that they're doing. And do you want to report on particularly HBCUs and where that stands?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes, there's a lot of excellent discussion during the agenda item on HBCUs with some great new ideas shared. This is a topic that we've discussed for several committee meetings, and I feel like this time we really did so with new energy and enthusiasm. Members will recall that this committee has been working with the White House Initiative on HBCUs for several years. The ACHP continues to look for ways to support the initiative's work. This is even more important now, as all of us who work in preservation are focused on bringing more skilled workers of color into the federal government and preservation. OCEO has 2 virtual student federal service interns who will work with the ACHP for the school year, this current school year, on the webinar series for 2023. First is Ryan Smith, who is a junior at Howard University. She discussed her ideas for a really innovative concept, an ambassador program for students at HBCUs to build interest in the historic buildings on HBCU campuses and bringing students together to talk about how to preserve their own campuses. It was noted that it is important to have students like Ryan be advocates to other students to get involved in historic preservation. Peer-to-peer communications make a real impact. And as someone who spends a lot of time in the classroom, students will listen to each other before they listen to me. So I certainly would second that concept. Also, Lynn Richmond, Ryan, and the second OCEO intern, Jasmine Lopez, who I believe is University of Texas, San Antonio, worked together on the 2023 list of subjects for webinars. And it sounds like the proposed subjects should be interesting topics. The first webinar, stay tuned, will be January 25th, 2023. Members will receive a list of the final webinars with the dates for the remainder in that series. Vice Chairman Tannenbaum suggested that a related connection to think about for the webinar series could be the Rosenwald Schools project, as it is currently making its way through Congress toward becoming a national historical park. There were many ways Julius Rosenwald supported the African-American community in the early to mid 1900s, so we are looking forward to making that connection. Susan Glimsher, seated next to me here, noted that the ACHP is working out plans for a partnership with the National Trust African-American Cultural Heritage Fund. Please. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to say that none of this has been finalized yet, but we are going to be working with Brent Leggs and Luana Holland on a joint fellowship / internship, because Ryan is deeply devoted to the preservation of Black churches. So it will support the National Trust Initiative, Preserving Black Churches. And there are lots of logistics to figure out. Ryan is over the moon at this opportunity, and we'll look forward to updating you on that as we know more.
Thank you, Susan. You're always there to back me up and let me know where I go wrong too. That concludes our report on HBCUs.
Great, thank you. And let me thank, while you're at the table there, Susan, thank you and your team for your efforts to bring more students from HBCUs into preservation and people of color into cultural resource management. Thank you. Very, very important work. Thank you so much. Luke, any other?
Two other briefer items. First on awards, the 2022 National Trust ACHP Award for Federal Partnerships in Historic Preservation will be presented during the virtual National Preservation Awards on Friday, November 4th from 4 to 5 p.m. Vice Chairman Jordan Tannenbaum will introduce the joint award in a taped segment. A hyperlink to the ceremony will be sent to members next week. I'll note that you don't have to be registered for the conference in order to view that. Is considered sort of a public free part of the conference. The nominations for the 2022-2023 ACHP HUD Secretary's Award for Excellence in Historic Preservation are moving through the evaluation process by ACHP and HUD staff in preparation for jury review this coming fall. And then finally, just a very brief item on social media outreach. November is Native American Heritage Month, and to kick things off, look for a new episode of the ACHP podcast, Preservation Perspectives, where I interviewed Sheila Bird, host of the Tipo Talk podcast. It was a lot of fun. That concludes my report.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the historic preservation policy and programs. I want to acknowledge the interesting discussion that the Preservation Initiative Committee had about a whole other part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And Rick, I'd like you to summarize the committee's input, share whether any action may be necessary on this. I believe you're going to propose a motion that letters be written to agencies that receive IRA funding along the lines that was mentioned earlier for national parks and public lands, conservation to encourage spending on traditional trades and hiring training. But you can flesh that out for me. Do a much better job, I'm sure. Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, we will have a motion at the end of my few talking points. The Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, has over $1.2 billion for enhancement of national parks and public lands. The funds are for conservation, protection, and resiliency projects by the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management, hiring staff for national park units, and priority NPS deferred maintenance projects. I'm sure they have a whole bunch of those. The PI committee, last week, we discussed how this unique funding opportunity potentially could include training and hiring in the traditional trades. For example, if conservation projects included work by conservation corps members could be introduced to and trained in the traditional trades. Also, craftspeople in the traditional trades could be hired to help address the deferred maintenance projects. And staffing up at the national parks could include hiring craftspeople and maintenance staff needed to help preserve historic properties. The committee also learned that spending, unfortunately, the plans have already been developed for this money for this year. However, this is a multi-year funding. In fact, I think I heard it was for 8 years, so this is only year one. So there still may be an opportunity for the ACHP to weigh in on this unique funding source. Therefore, I would like to make the following motion. move that the ACHP directs the chairman to reach out to the Secretary of the Interior and the directors of the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management to encourage the use of public lands funding in the Inflation Reduction Act for traditional trades, hiring, and training. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
This is Reno. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Reno. Is there a second? Don't be shy.
I think we have a motion by Rick, and I don't think we have
that's
a
right.
second yet.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Luke. And discussion? Yes, Pat. Oh, I think it's new. Oh, no. Is it new? Oh. Yes, oh, okay, oh, okay. Our apologies, our apologies.
Rick, if you want to repeat the text for those who don't have it in front of them, please.
Sure. Okay, the motion will go as follows. So I'll be the maker of the motion. Is that what you're looking for?
You already made it and it's been seconded. There's some around the table who don't have it in writing in front of them. So it might be a good idea for you to just repeat it, just for information. Thanks.
All right, sounds good. I'll go ahead and repeat it. Move that the ACHP directs the chairman to reach out to the Secretary of the Interior and the directors of the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management to encourage the use of public lands funding in the Inflation Reduction Act for traditional trades, hiring, and training.
Reid, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I just want to clarify the notion of having a discussion about this was covered in a paper in the meeting book. And in fact, there was some consideration or suggestion that the members should come to the discussion, to the PI committee discussion, prepared to recommend actions. The notion of making this motion, the idea of making this motion came forth in the PI committee meeting itself, which was just late last week. That's why the motion itself was not in the meeting book. But it's not uncommon for the idea of a motion to urge a letter. In this case, really what it's urging is communication or a letter come out of a committee meeting and then be surfaced at a business meeting. Thanks.
Okay, shall we? This is a voice. This is just not a voice vote. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, if not, all those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstain? Abstain. Yeah.
Abstain.
Okay, all right, got it. Okay, it passes. The motion passes. Thank you. Rick, do you have any other reports?
No, sir, that's it.
All right, thank you. Yes, CAC.
Yes, Colleen and I had a very brief chat earlier about sort of IRA money that Department of Transportation is getting. And I just wondered, as you're looking at writing letters to agencies, there are a number of agencies that would not be covered by the trades training, but letters to them regarding especially funding for SHPOs and THPOs could be an appropriate action. So I just wonder sort of what you're thinking about that part of it as well.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that a letter urging agencies to fund or provide assistance to state and tribal historic preservation officers went out yesterday. That was speaking to a part of the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, that gave a number of agencies monies, funding to carry out environmental reviews and to sort of augment their existing capacities. The component that we're talking now was a sort of a separate pot of money that was, at least from our perspective, more focused on traditional trades. So this is really sort of a way for us to use our past experience, as Rick, I think, mentioned with the task force, to sort of elevate some of those recommendations that came out of the out of the proceedings of that task force earlier. I think we certainly could. I mean, if your point is to focus some of those recommendations on tribes and others receiving some assistance. I think we could certainly cast the net broadly about the importance of providing that training across a whole range of partners. Would that sort of get to your point?
I wasn't particularly speaking about the trades training.
Okay.
I was taking it to the next level.
Gotcha.
And that was, you know, basically there are many federal agencies that have money that has to do with, as you pointed out, environmental review. So how do we share that wealth as broadly as possible was my question.
I would just add, part of the reason you don't know about that is the letters went out late yesterday. So one of the things I will work with Blythe tomorrow to share with you all, and we'll share it with the members broadly. An example, there was a dozen or so letters. I won't share them all, but we'll share an example of the sort of letters that went out that spoke exactly to that point. Yeah.
There was no pledge card. We'll work on that. But, so yes, and I had referred to that earlier. So yeah. Thank you, Kek. Other comments? Okay, there's no new business, I believe. There is, for your calendars, the next business meeting will be March 1st, 2023. Before adjourning, I would like to thank all of you for the time and for the passion that you bring to this. I know for all of you, this is not just a meeting that you have to attend. You want to be here and you want to make a difference in this area, and I appreciate that. I really, really do. And I found our discussions today only emblematic of that and an example of that. So thank you so much. I want to especially call out the chairs, Reno, Jay, Luke, Rick. I've been to your committee meetings now for a year and a half. I've been going to all the committee meetings. Terrific leadership. You're just, I want to tell you, you always come prepared. And you model the best in management and leadership of these kinds of situations and these kinds of meetings. Thank you for the time and the passion that you bring. And very importantly, I want to thank the staff. Two full-time jobs could not be done. The only way to do it is with a staff that's there all the time, helping in any way they can. And particularly someone that is not as technologically inclined as yours truly, and leading that effort. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Reid is really my left and right hand in this respect. We meet sometimes more, but we meet every week. We go over an agenda. Thank you, Reid, for the excellent job you've done. I really just would have to abdicate if you weren't there. So thank you so much. And the final thing I want to say is in a year and a half, I've really enjoyed this work, and I've enjoyed working with all of you. And I'm embracing it, as I think that this may go on for a while. And I want to encourage all of you to feel free to contact me. Please, that goes for every single member here, every single person in this room, and people who are not here. Questions, comments, suggestions, whatever. I want to hear from you. And I want to try to do the best job and leave whatever legacy I might be leaving, the best legacy I can for the time that I'm in this position. So thank you all. And this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.